a two-place one, and if you look on the second row, the fourth airplane down is the D model. You can see how much bigger the canopy is to accommodate the second crew members.
Yeah.
So these all belong to various state Air National Guard units. You might be able to pick your state out of there. And they're kept here in flyable storage, and they be needed as replacement aircraft someplace around the world, in the U.S. or from some other country. Origins go back to the 1970s. The Air Force was already buying the F-15, and there was a faction in the Pentagon that called the lightweight fighter mafia. And they were advocates of a small, single-engine, lightweight, maneuverable airplane. And the F-16 certainly turned out to do that. Made by Lockheed right now. There's about 26 countries around the world fly them. You'll see some airplanes on the right. These are the Lockheed C-130 Hercules. 5 in this first row here that belong to the Royal Norwegian Air Force. They bought a newer version of it, the J model, but there's still about 8,000 hours of flying time left on those airframes. So they're hoping to find a worldwide customer for it. So it's kind of giving me 566. And when the Navy moved their airplanes down during that time, only a few flew in. The rest were transported in with the wings off on flatbed trucks. Here's some engines here. These are the J-79 engines that powered the F-4 Phantom. And they're in excess of what they need for parts. So they've gone in and they've taken all the valuable metal parts, you know, high value metal objects out of them, and then pretty soon they're just going to scrap them. Now these engines over here in the white crates are turboprop engines used to power the P-3 Orion or the C-130. So that's just another way to store them in the crates with that white spray lat material on them. And of course here's some of the big engines up here. You can see the big turbofan, how big that intake is. They power the big transports. You know, folks, they brought a C-130 in a couple of years ago. It had 33,000 hours on it. Whoa. That's like flying for 3.5 years. So I think we got our money's worth out of that airplane. And folks, you have to remember that airplanes are like people. They're not designed to last forever like us. They just do wear out. And pretty soon it gets too unsafe to fly them or too expensive to fix them. The TA-4J Seahawk, or Skyhawk, it's the two-place training version of the Navy A-4 attack aircraft that first came into service in the mid-1950s and built by the Douglas Company. And it's a single-place, single-engine, subsonic attack airplane. Since it's designed mainly to attack ground targets, it didn't have to go supersonic. In fact, the slower and more maneuverable you can get when you deliver your ordnance, the closer you can get to your target. It's a smaller twin-engine version of the Hercules. And the Air Force initially flew 10 of these out of Panama to support our military missions in embassies in Central and South America, and more powerful engines on it. But with the latest budget cuts, they're not going to fly them, so a lot of them are coming out and going from the factory, going into storage. Of course, they're trying to find other government agencies like the State Department that might like to put them in service, or perhaps a worldwide customer someplace. Over on the left, we're going to get into the fighter country here. These first fighters are the ones I flew as a young aviator. This F-15, the first aircraft built by McDonnell Douglas. In Vietnam, we found that our F-4s and 105s were not as maneuverable as the smaller Soviet MiGs. And so in the 1960s, the Air Force had a competition and selected McDonnell Douglas to build a Grumman F-14 Tomcat. And this is for about 33 years, this was the principal Navy fighter interceptor aboard the aircraft carrier. It was the last of the Cat series of fighters that Grumman built for the Navy. It had two big powerful engines with afterburners. Again, two people. The rear persons operated the radar. Big radar, had great radar coverage for an interceptor. Swing wings. The wings are out for takeoff and landings where you can land slower. And when they go way back, you can really go fast up at altitude. Now the F-14D was the last version that they built of it, And they had not only a capability for a fighter or interceptor, but in the D version, they also gave it the capability to carry air-to-ground ordnance. So they used to nickname this one as the Bombcat. Now the next one, the F-14 on the right, is just the standard version. Pretty interesting airplane. If you saw the movie Tom Cruise, this is what he pretended to fly in that movie. Alrighty, on the right, an interesting airplane. Replaced the little T-37. Had some problems during the test program. They only tested it about a year before they shut the program down, but many think it was really due to budget cuts. And besides, they cut back the training flow for the T-37, so they extended its life a little bit. The silver aircraft is the T-1 Sea Star, the Navy version of the Air Force's T-33 Shooting Star. Navy didn't ever much like flying an Air Force airplane, so when they were forced into it, they would always soup it up. They put a bigger, more powerful engine in this, better flaps on it. They put a tail hook on it so it could do the carrier landings and takeoffs, and it actually raised the rear seat so that the instructor had a better view. So they made a lot of neat improvements. I kind of wish I got my wings in that airplane. It would have been a little peppier than the T-33 I flew. Well, this big one on the left is the DC-10 airliner. Yep. And again, this was an example where the government bought a used airliner. I think American Airlines flew it. And when they retired it, the government bought it and they changed it into a flying test bed. Look on the left side behind the entrance door, you'll see a great big opening there, 11 feet across. And that was used on the inside of that opening. They would put various antennas and sensing equipment. They would take the airplane off and then open up that door, and they could then evaluate how good those sensors worked in the actual real environment. The last test they did with them, they were evaluating sensors that could detect ballistic missiles being launched. And this is the second time it's been in storage here. And if there's a need for another test program, they pull it out again and refurbish it and put more antennas in there and sensors. Airplane on the left really had an interesting career. It started its life as an airborne tanker, a KC-135. Then the Federal Aviation Administration used it to evaluate air routes around the Pacific. Tactical Air Command used it to escort deploying fighter squadrons overseas during the war years. And then it became modified for a VIP transport in the Pacific for years. So one airplane really had an interesting set of careers. Over on the right,